In the spring of 2024, I moved to Japan to attend Japanese language school. As wild as it sounds, this was actually my first trip to Japan, and I ended up staying for an entire year. While I was in Japan, I attended a language school run by a company called ISI, and I specifically went to the Harajuku campus. My goal for learning at an actual language school was to be able to study Japanese while being surrounded by Japanese culture. When I first decided on this plan, I did probably the same kind of research you're doing right now, checking out what different language schools there are online and looking for student reviews to see what the experience is like. At the time, I couldn't find a lot of content by students who had actually gone through a language school, sharing what it was like for them. Today, I want to make the kind of video that I was looking for when I first set out on this journey. I'm going to talk in depth about several important areas of attending language school at ISI Harajuku. Whether you're just curious about what it's like to go to language school in another country for a year, or if you're preparing for your own Japanese adventures, this is the video you've been looking for. How I chose ISI Harajuku. When I was picking my language school, I did a bunch of research online first. I identified what my key goals were. Some of those included studying for the JLPT, as well as preparing to hopefully be able to get a job in Japan one day after I graduated from school. I wanted to make sure I had plenty of practice reading and writing and speaking along the way, and ideally I wanted a school with a good student-to-teacher ratio so that I could get the support I was looking for while I was learning. During the process, I worked with a company called Nihon. It's a free resource for Japanese language students, and they help vet schools ahead of time so that you can pick from a smaller list of schools and have someone there to help you along the way, make sure the school will meet your goals. They also help with the school application process, and like many things in Japan, there's a ton of paperwork required. So I found it really invaluable to have them along for the ride. Looking through the schools that Nihon worked with in Tokyo, I built a spreadsheet to compare the curriculums of the different schools, as well as what courses they offered, specifically covering the areas I was interested in, like studying for the JLPT and studying business Japanese. From there, I was able to narrow it down to my top 3 schools, and Nihon helped me pick the one that was going to match my goals the best. That ended up being ISI Harajuku. One of the things I didn't know when I started was that some language schools have an age limit, and they're mostly geared towards younger language learners. For example, one of the schools in my top 3 actually wasn't interested in taking students over the age of 30. This is definitely not a rule that applies to all schools, but having Nihon there to explain that to me helped save me a bunch of time in the school application process. So with my school picked out, I was able to get my school application in as early as possible to make sure I got an opening during the semester I wanted to start. Visas and school support. One area where I definitely had a lot of questions before moving to Japan was visas. There were 2 major kinds of visas I was interested in. The first one is a student visa, and the second one is a working visa. Language schools like ISI help students apply for their student visa to attend for up to 2 years. From there, if you decide to stay in Japan, you can convert your student visa to a work visa if you get hired by a company willing to sponsor you. Just anecdotally, what I heard is that it can be easier to convert a student visa to a work visa than to get a work visa from scratch. So you have a little advantage if you're already in the country and on a student visa when you're applying for jobs, especially at smaller companies who might not have all the resources needed to bring foreigners all the way from their home country to Japan. When I got my student visa, it was actually not for the entire 2 years. And that was the same for a lot of my other classmates as well. Luckily, ISI let us know ahead of time that this was expected and we would still be able to use a full 2 years of a language school student visa, but they would just need to help us apply for an extension partway through. Since my original visa was for longer than a year, I didn't end up having to do the extension process, but I watched many of my friends in school do it, and the office staff and teachers at ISI definitely helped every step of the way. Even though students applying for jobs after language school need the sponsorship of the company they're going to be working at, I did see the school also supporting those students in the work visa transition process as well, which is really encouraging. Placement and first week. Before moving to Japan, I took a placement test online to decide what level class I should start in. I placed in the Intermediate 2 class, which is right in the middle at ISI, and progressed from there through Intermediate 3, Advanced 1, and Advanced 2 during my year in Japan. I arrived the weekend before my classes started on the recommendation of the school. They wanted to make sure that we were able to use our full 2-year visa in Japan to attend classes for up to 2 years if we wanted. So they encouraged us not to arrive too early, so we didn't start the visa too early and run out of time at the end. My first day of school was just an orientation with the other new students, meeting the teachers and staff, and getting an idea of what our first semester was going to look like. They handed out a rule book for how the school was going to work and gave us our schedules, as well as assigning us to the lead teacher we were going to work with for that semester. Campus atmosphere. The ISI Harajuku campus is this great blend of cozy and modern all at the same time. Kind of like a mix between a library and a creative co-working space, unlike any school campus I had been on before. The school is on the 6th floor of the building, and when you exit the elevators, you enter right into a lobby space where students can eat lunch, study for class, catch up with friends, and that kind of thing. They actually do have a library in the lobby space as well, where you can take out some Japanese books to study. Each semester, we were assigned to a single classroom, and the classrooms themselves were really clean and modern. They had movable desks so we could rearrange for whatever kind of group work we were doing, and all the classrooms had giant windows with views out over the neighborhood. Although I think one classroom just had a view of a graveyard, but you could see like other buildings around. It was nice. They're good views. Class and teaching style. Each semester, I had 4 to 5 teachers, and they would change daily who was teaching the class. This was great because I felt like I was able to pick up different ways of speaking Japanese and maybe different nuances of teaching from the different teachers I had. All of them were really great, which is another surprise given how many teachers I had over the course of an entire year. But I think that's definitely a strong point of ISI, worth knowing. For a given semester, we would have a specific rotation of classes throughout the week. That meant some days we were studying specifically for the JLPT, some days we had business preparation or maybe practice writing essays, and then there were other things that we did every day, like often we studied grammar and basically every day we studied a bit of kanji at the start of the day. I found this helpful as well because maybe I would not quite grasp a grammar point the first time we covered it in a grammar class, but then it would come up again while we were preparing for a speech in a different class, and in that context, it stuck in my head a little better. I felt like by approaching Japanese from all these different angles, I was able to get a better grasp on what parts I actually needed to express myself in Japanese. And having the support of all these teachers along the way really helped me feel like I could get clarity when I was getting stuck on a specific point. Homework and study expectations. The way that Gogo Nihon organizes schools actually has to do with the amount of homework there is, as well as class time. ISI Harajuku was a medium fast-paced school, which means the expectation was, in addition to the 4 hours of class, we'd also have homework to do after class every day. This was one of the reasons I picked ISI because I knew I wasn't going to be working while I was in Japan, and I wanted to be able to really focus my effort on learning Japanese. That said, I did have many classmates who held down part-time jobs at the same time as attending school. It definitely limited their time for study outside of class, but I didn't notice any of them suffering as a result. That's very likely because working a part-time job itself is a great opportunity to speak Japanese outside of class, and so whether they knew it or not, they were actually boosting their Japanese every day. In reality, the homework load flexed a bit from one semester to another, and even from one day to the next during the week. There were definitely days where I did 3 or 4 hours of homework outside of class, but there were also lighter days as well. One thing I observed from my fellow classmates that interested me as an adult learner was that there's kind of a different mindset required to really succeed in a language school. Some of my classmates were entering language school straight out of college, and I remember the kind of mindset I had about education at that point. During high school and college, it's possible to build up kind of a defense mechanism or defensive approach to how you learn in school. Students at that time are going to school every day for years and years in a row, and so if they want to pursue anything else on the side, they have to make trade-offs between their learning and study time. While that can definitely be healthy at times, it can also lead to bad study habits. For myself personally, I knew I was paying money to be at language school, and the reason I was doing that was to get better at Japanese. That meant I tried every day to engage as much as I could in class, no matter how tired I was. And also it meant that I pushed myself to continue learning outside of class as well. Just like any schoolwork, there's ways to work around the homework and do it a little faster or do it in a way that you don't learn anything. But that didn't align with my goals in attending school in the first place. I think that's an important point to note if you're thinking about attending language school. Obviously, I didn't do any scientific experiments, but I got the feeling that with the same number of school days in a semester, some students were getting 2 or maybe even 3 times as much out of the experience as other students who might be coasting a little and not pushing themselves to work as hard as they could. Obviously, you need to know where that line is for yourself and stay healthy while you're in school. But this is just my encouragement to be honest with yourself about what you're hoping to get out of the program and to use that to shape how you do your studying and how you engage in class. Looking back at my time in school, I definitely don't regret all the work I put in, even though there were times when I could have gotten by doing a little less. Especially in class, asking questions of the teacher, engaging in group role plays and presentations. Those kind of activities really pushed my learning to the next level in a way that I just wouldn't have gotten if I was trying to skate through and do the least amount of work possible. Writing in Japanese. This is an area that I've actually got a surprisingly large amount of questions on, so I thought it would be helpful to talk about. When I was self-studying before going to language school, I had actually learned the stroke order for kanji, but somehow along the way I missed learning how to write kana characters entirely. When I realized this, there was only like a couple weeks left until school started, so I quickly printed some online writing practice sheets and just wrote as many kana as I could in the last 2 weeks before school. It might have been a little bit of a rocky start to the semester, but there was so much opportunity to practice that by the end of a year in school, I'm way more confident now at handwriting in Japanese than I was when I started. There was a lot of flexibility for students who wanted to use tablets or laptops to do their homework. But for me personally, I found that I was able to learn a lot by handwriting all the answers to my homework and my essays. There is actually a different connection that your brain makes when you write with a pencil on paper, and I was hoping to use every advantage I could to push more Japanese into my head. I know it can be kind of daunting if you haven't written in Japanese at all before, but it is still worth it to be able to write in Japanese beyond just those cognitive learning benefits. I stayed with 6 or 7 homestay families while I was in Japan, and every time I moved, I had to go back to the shiyakusho and re-register my address again. That involved filling out tons of paperwork in a high-pressure situation, and all of it was in Japanese. It's true that these days, you may not have to write in Japanese every day, but the moments when you do have to write in Japanese, there may be no other alternative. So it's just an incredibly useful life skill to have available to you if you're planning to live in Japan for any length of time. JLPT test prep. One of the classes we had almost every week was a specific JLPT study class. To prepare for this class, we were given access to an online learning resource run by the Ask Publishing Company. It was actually really helpful. They had about a dozen grammar points we were going to learn that week, as well as a story or a conversation that used all of them so we could see how they worked in context. From there, they would have a teacher and a student talk through the points and explain how they worked. And then you could even go in deeper and study all of the different vocabulary used in the story and see breakdowns of the grammar points with exact rules for how to use them correctly. After reviewing that content to prepare for class, we would begin the class with a quiz based on the grammar points we studied that week. The teacher would then look at the class collectively to see which questions we all struggled with, and then take some time to walk through those grammar points again and make sure we had some examples and a better understanding of how to use them. After the grammar studying portion, we transitioned over to reading practice. My first semester in language school, I was in the N3 level JLPT prep class, and then after I passed that test in the summer, I moved on to the N2 level JLPT prep class. For the N2, the reading practice is really important because there are only 2 total sections on the test. That means if you're not able to manage your time during the reading sections, you can just fully run out of time to finish the test and fail only due to a lack of time management. I found this reading study really important because a lot of times, even on the real tests, there will be a passage about a fairly complicated topic that I didn't know very much about in English or in Japanese. Getting experience with making it through passages like this, as well as strategies to successfully answer the questions afterwards, was super invaluable for my passing the JLPT N2. Without those strategies, I might have just continued to get stuck on all that I didn't know in a reading passage instead of moving through and focusing on what I was able to take away in order to keep moving through the test. Outside of our specific JLPT practice class, the kanji we learned in class every day were actually also on the JLPT, and we even did some practice JLPT listening questions in class as well. Thanks to all of this JLPT preparation, I was able to pass both the N3 and N2 level test during the time I was at ISI Harajuku. It definitely took a lot of work inside and outside of class, but I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to do it without their help. Business Japanese class. Another one of the classes we did each week was a business Japanese class. This changed from one semester to another, especially as I was moving between levels at ISI, but we studied things like how to write emails, how to conduct ourselves in an interview, and things for the workplace as well, like Japanese business etiquette and common phrases and important scenarios we would need to be able to understand if we were to get a job in Japan after graduating. This was really cool because while you can Google answers about Japanese business culture, there's a lot of nuance to it that's hard to pick up from just reading textbooks and other people's answers online. Having a teacher with personal experience and understanding of the nuances of business culture there to explain what we were reading in the textbook and answer specific questions we had along the way was super helpful. We also did a lot of role play during this class, and having the teacher listen to us while we were working through these phrases we were learning was also really valuable because they could help correct us where we were making mistakes and also explain where we might not be using a phrase in the correct context, something that's really important in Japanese business culture specifically. As I progressed through the different levels of classes at ISI, we even did things like writing business plans for a real company who sent a representative to work with us at the school, doing company research on industries that we were interested in, and tons of practice on things like mock interviews, which is something that's really hard to do outside of the context of being at a language school. All in all, I think the business focus of the program at ISI is one of its greatest strengths. This is an area where I think employers will be able to tell a difference in students who've graduated from a program like this to ones who maybe cobbled it together themselves. It just felt like there were so many moving parts to know, and having someone there to guide me through that process really helped me walk away with a much more solid foundation for, hopefully, my future employment in Japan one day. Career prep and job support. ISI did a great job of connecting us with career services and job fairs and making sure we had exposure to the companies who would be able to get us in front of open job positions. They also provided a ton of individual coaching for people who already knew what industry they wanted to apply to, and also people who were not sure where they wanted to work or were maybe having trouble finding work in the first industry that they tried. The school helps with coaching students as they work on writing their resume and the other documents needed for job applications, and they offer practice interviews along the way, even specific practice interviews tailored to a company that you're applying for. The really direct feedback that students were able to get from teachers during these one-on-one sessions was something that you really just couldn't get by practicing your interviews with your other Japanese friends. There were a lot of things different about Japanese business culture than the business culture where I'm from in the US, and that even came down to what industries you would be able to apply to given your specific university major and career experience. I'm in a situation where my major is in the exact opposite field of where my career experience is, because I studied music production and film, and right now I'm a software engineer. Luckily for me, my work experience means that it won't be hard for me to find a job in Japan, but for some students, especially those fresh out of college, they were struggling a little bit with finding what career path would match their major, which might have been more important in Japan than their home countries where they went to university. In those circumstances, the teachers were a huge help, figuring out what type of work someone was good at or was interested in, and then working backwards from there to show how you might do that work in different industries that you could access with your specific major or existing work experience. The career prep and job support part of ISI was another 5-star feature of the program that I can't recommend enough. Presentations and projects. We had group work and presentations basically every semester. There were presentations during the final, and we would have group work depending on what unit we were studying in class. These ranged from simple explanations of things we liked or our hobbies to writing technical business plans or working through a scenario from our textbook that might use important grammar or a specific speaking style we were studying. I know group work isn't for everybody, but I found that really engaging in these exercises was a great opportunity to learn. I made tons of friends at ISI, and part of that was being in class together and doing group exercises, even if we felt they were silly at the time or they were, a challenge, we had to come back to school and work late on them. I found that by engaging in these, I was able to get so much more out of class. The experience of building something with my peers in Japanese is really hard to reproduce as an early language learner, and I found it incredibly invaluable. For the record, I'm also not a huge group projects fan, but I'm still glad they included it in the curriculum, and I felt like I took a lot away from it. Field trips and events. In addition to the classroom learning, ISI put on some great field trips and events as well. My first semester, we got to go to a barbecue with a bunch of our classmates and visit an aquarium together along the way. A different semester, we got to spend a day at a Japanese nature conservation company to get a feel for what it was like to work in a real Japanese workplace. We also went to a few museums and gardens to study some Japanese history. For students who were interested in pursuing further education after their time at ISI, we divided into groups and visited some famous universities around Tokyo for a day. My last semester, I even got to go visit a hydrogen power museum with a few of my classmates, and we had a lot of fun learning about one of Japan's innovative alternative energy programs. ISI also put a lot of effort into after-school events. These included classes on things like Sado and Shodo, as well as opportunities to meet with representatives from job placement companies. We had a presentation from a suit company about formal wear in Japanese workplaces, and there was an event where we got to meet with previous graduates who worked in the industries we were interested in. I had a chance to talk with some software engineers who were currently working in Tokyo, and hearing their experience of the job search process was really helpful for me. If there was one area of my time at ISI that I wish I invested a little more in, it was these after-class events. I went to a few of them and had a great time, but I wish I had made time to go to more. It's a great chance to meet your classmates and learn something fun along the way as well. What surprised me? The biggest benefit of attending ISI Harajuku that I hadn't thought about ahead of time was all the other students I got to work with while I was there. I made some great friends in language school from very different backgrounds than my own, and I never would have had that opportunity if I hadn't gone to ISI. There were semesters where I had classmates from something like a dozen different countries at the same time, and getting to hear everybody's perspectives and everybody's accents and working together in a common language was such an incredible experience. I can honestly say I have never been in an environment with that much diversity before, and it really expanded the way I think about the world and the way I work with people who come from different backgrounds than myself. It really is hard to reproduce an environment like that in any other kind of circumstance. Think about it, people who don't speak your language, all in one place, working on the same thing at the same time. Other than learning a shared language, there isn't really another domain where I've had that experience. Another thing that surprised me was that the fast pace of class wasn't overwhelming like I thought it was going to be. It actually helped me learn faster in the end. Probably the first half of the first semester, I felt like I was underwater the entire time. Part of that was transitioning to living in a new culture and speaking a new language all the time. But the other part was that the classes at intermediate level 2 really go along at a good clip if you're not used to learning language in a language school environment. I was a little worried at first that meant maybe I'd been placed in a level that was too hard, or maybe I wasn't going to succeed at language school at all. But my teachers encouraged me to keep going and trying my best, and that I would eventually be able to keep up with the pace of the course. It turned out they were right. By the end of advanced level 2, I was still struggling in classes that we had, for sure. But I felt like my brain had changed and was now able to learn at a much faster pace than when I started in language school. In a way, having this fast pace of class undid some of the habits I had built through self-study that maybe encouraged me to study at a little bit of a slower pace. Now, speed isn't everything, but if you want to learn an entire language, at some point, you have to learn a lot of things. So being able to learn at a nice clip was a great advantage. And I was really glad that that fast pace turned out to be a benefit and not a drawback. Another thing that surprised me was just how impactful the Japanese connections outside of school ended up being on my overall learning process. For me, this was getting lunch with classmates after school, or hanging out with new friends in Tokyo, or even talking with my homestay families and going on adventures with them on the weekends. I would say that as great as ISI was, maybe half of my Japanese language progress really came from this outside of school exposure that I got. I think that's important to know because I wasn't able to just show up at school and have someone hand me an entire set of fluent Japanese knowledge. I really had to put in the time and go beyond the experience of the classroom to put that knowledge into work and use it to connect with people I cared about for it to really start to stick and become my own. I went to language school maybe 11 years after graduating university, and to be honest, I was a little nervous about getting back into the flow of a classroom environment again, especially knowing I was going to be working alongside other students who had been at school more recently than me. In the end, though, I really just had a great time at language school, and that was the most pleasant surprise of all. Moving to Japan and learning Japanese in Japan was maybe the hardest thing I've done in my life so far, but I also had way more fun than I thought I was going to along the way. And I'm so glad I took the leap. What I took with me. I gained a great deal of confidence in speaking Japanese and navigating Japanese culture while at ISI. This included things like Japanese business culture and just norms in general that were much harder to study from my home in the US. I also made a ton of new friendships at a deeper level than I ever expected. And as someone who began studying Japanese a little later than some of my peers, I learned that mindset was still more important than my starting skill level. It was such a valuable discovery that when I put my mind to something, I can achieve a lot, even if it's an area where I don't have any natural strengths or I'm starting almost entirely from zero. I'm really thankful to ISI for, in a way, not just teaching me Japanese, but also helping me see how I learn and grow as a human. Final thoughts. If you couldn't tell so far, I 100% recommend ISI Harajuku. I'm not sponsored at all in making this video, but it was just such an incredible experience. If I could do it all again, I would do it exactly the same. It's worth calling out that the semester after I left, the school actually merged their Harajuku campus with the Shinjuku campus. So there have been some changes. I think the class structures may be a little bit different. But based on my experience working with ISI, the company, I would definitely recommend looking into them if you're interested in doing a language school in Japan. The teachers and the curriculum were just at the next level, even beyond my expectations when I started the program. If you're ready to put in the effort and really engage at a level to get the most you can out of your language school experience, I think ISI can meet you where you are and take you to that next level you're hoping to get to. I know I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat. Thanks for joining me today. This is really fun. If you have any questions that I wasn't able to answer during this video, definitely leave me a comment below, and I'm happy to help however I can. I look forward to seeing you next time.